Hey, everybody. Welcome to UGA Sports Live. My name is Radi Nabulsi. I'm joined by Dayne Young, Jake Roos, and, of course, the Hall of Fame coach, Jim Donnan himself. We're all in separate locations now because Jake decided he needs to go on a little vacation. He's actually not on vacation. He's on assignment, but we have him. He's out bringing incredible recruiting news to UGAsports.com. We had a big weekend we need to talk about. Of course, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to the teams practicing. Monday was the first day in full pads. I'm sure we'll see some of this. Saturday, they were in Sanford Stadium in shells, and we'll ask Coach Don for some of his thoughts on practice and such. Dane will give us his insights as well. But before we get started, I want to say thanks to the folks here at Classic City Eats. Good crowd today on a rainy Tuesday. I have the sausage, cheese, and pepper plate in front of me, and they kind of fix it up there with a bunch of hush puppies because Classic City Eats knows how to take care of us. And the plate was a little messed up, but then Dave came by and fixed it by taking a few sausages out, So good for presentation. So shout out to the folks at Classic City Eats. I know that people want to talk about practice, but I think the biggest news that we need to talk about right now was this, I don't want to call it secret visits, Jake, but under the radar visits by 4 of the top 6 players in the nation came to Athens Saturday. And I know that the coaches are not allowed to host anybody. I know they can't meet with the players. They recruited, as Coach Donnan pointed out last week, the recruiting dead period has been extended through September. So the coaches are not allowed to see the players in person, on campus or off campus. Now they can FaceTime them, they can talk to them. The kids could be walking around on FaceTime with the coach. The coach could be pointing stuff out to them, but they're not allowed to meet with them. So tell us who was in town and why it matters, and give us a rundown for the people who didn't have access to the War Room Saturday. What happened?
Yeah, it was a huge weekend for Georgia. I think easily the biggest recruiting weekend they've had over the course of the year. I know a lot of people were kind of turning eyes over to Oklahoma and that Sooner Summit that they were putting together, led by Caleb Williams out there. But Georgia kind of quietly behind the scenes put together a weekend that rivals about anyone that anybody's had since the start of the shutdown.
This could be ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be up there for sure. You're talking about the number 1 player in the nation in Corey Foreman, the number 2 player in the nation in Amarius Mims, the number 1 pro-style quarterback in the nation in Brock Vandegrift, as well as the number 1 defensive tackle in the nation in Mason Smith. You also had Teriana Arnold, who's Rivals 250 cornerback, safety type. You also had Lavassier Carroll, Georgia running back commit, and Xavier Sori also made that trip, and that was a big one for him. He's a guy I know that Georgia really likes and has been on. So just a star-studded weekend. Like you said, I'm sure coaches would have loved to have been able to put in some FaceTime, but how advantageous has Brock Vandegrift been over the course of all of this? His ability to serve as tour guide, show him around town. He's a guy who kind of knows the city in and out and knows what these coaches want to get across to these top players. And I think that all reports sound like it went very well, and they got to experience everything they were looking for. And, for people who were out there wondering, it's, Sori, Arnold, those guys have been here before, but this was Mason Smith's first visit to Athens. He's never been on campus and never been to the city, had a chance to go around and see, kind of the lay of the land with Vandegrift leading the way for him. I think that was huge. People have asked, is Georgia in this thing with Mason Smith? I think that the fact that he showed up this weekend, a very clear indicator that they are. He followed through with those plans, and sounds like things went really well.
Coach Donnan, I want to ask you this: when you see that all these 5 stars are on campus, but not on campus, but in Athens, and it's great that you have your bell cow, your quarterback, showing them around, trying to pull this team together. How frustrating it had to be for Kirby Smart to know that number 1 defensive tackle, number 1 defensive end, number 1 offensive tackle in the nation, number 1 pro-style quarterback are all in town, but you can't meet with them. I just got to know how would you have handled that?
I think the main thing, though, is he's a lot more frustrated that if they weren't coming here. So I think that they made that visit, like Jake alluded to, shows you that nobody's going to come here from that far away if they don't have some kind of interest in, even though I guess Foreman and Mason are really good friends, and think Mason Smith are good friends. And like that, but they're both, one guy from California and one from Louisiana. And if you look back to just the fact that Brock had a lot of success when the tight end came in from out on the West Coast, showing him around. And I think Jake showed him around some too with that private interview. But it was good for us to kind of set a precedent there. Say, look, we had a guy here that was up in the air, and he came in and he made his decision after he was around Athens and got to meet some of the players and see the university. And we've said this on our show from day one, that a lot of these kids are making decisions without making getting to go to the campuses. I mean, you've seen that around the country, and now these guys coming in like they did, at least they've got an opportunity to see, instead of the pictures and the sounds and all, they actually saw it in purpose. And I'm excited about the fact that they did come here together, because there's a lot of bit in my recruiting expertise over the years. There's a lot to be said about one guy feeling real good about a place like Mims does, and he's talking about what he knows, and he's telling the same thing that Brock's saying, who's already committed. So these guys are hitting it from all sides here. So looks good from my standpoint. And I'm sure Kirby is a little frustrated about it, but got to be happy they made it.
Yeah, you make a good point that he's got to be excited that they actually came there. I mean, Corey Foreman's in from California, Mason Smith from Houma, Louisiana, which is not a short trip at all. Dayne, you are our guy that we go to for all the technical stuff. You're the reason we're able to get this show on the air. You've been the brains behind our watch along party. From a technological standpoint, what would have been the easiest way for the coaches to be in touch with these kids when they were in Athens? What could they have done to kind of say, hey, look, let's show you around? Was it all FaceTime? Can you do Zoom meetings and stuff like that? What were they doing to try to say, hey, look, while you're around, we can't talk to you. We can be on the other side of this wall. You can be outside the building, but we can't talk to you face to face. Give us an idea of what you would have done from a technological standpoint.
I mean, what I can tell you is I know how to run Zoom meetings and FaceTimes, and I know coaches how to do all that stuff too. I don't know exactly what's allowed and what's not allowed in those situations. So I don't even want to opine on probably what the coaches did for communication purposes. I do think one thing that Coach Donnan said that was important, though, is that these guys came together because Athens is different right now. And so seeing downtown Athens, seeing Clark County, even if they walked on campus, which I'm not sure if they did or they didn't, you would think they probably did, but I don't know that for sure. It's a different place right now. I was on campus the first day of classes. It did not feel like any first day of classes that I've ever seen. It was a bit of a ghost town in some ways, not as much energy, not as much hustle and bustle of people trying to walk across campus or get on a bus. People are treating Athens differently right now, at least in the daytime as I see it. I don't know what happens downtown at night. I've got 2 kids and I'm too old for that scene. So we'll see what happens in those situations. But the bonds that they're making with each other together, that's what's important about the visit, not necessarily seeing what Athens is in its current state, because it's a different Athens than what Brock Vandergriff can tell them he's seen before.
Yeah, I would point out one other thing here about you were saying what the coaches can do and what they can't, and I'm not sure what they could as far as the technological, but I do feel like the one thing that Kirby's always stressed and most head coaches stress is, we want you to see without us pointing out everything. When a kid makes a visit, on an official visit or an unofficial visit, I feel like the coaches are not on these guys 24/7. They're letting them interact with our players. The players are the best guys you got to recruit for you. And I'm sure some of these guys probably met some of these players. It'd be ridiculous for this kid Foreman to come here and not talk to JT Daniels and also Milton, 2 kids from the West Coast. So I know that's if they can talk to Brock Vandergriff, they can sure talk to our players. So I would think Kirby would have tried to set some of that up, and his staff, just where he can be around some of these players, because they're going to tell you how it is. And most of the time they're going to sell the kids on the program. And it's pretty obvious that that's what Kirby's used as his MO since he's been here, is our own players. So just to have them in the proximity and be around here compared to being on these Zoom meetings from their homes, it was huge. I would say I don't know how many of these guys will get, but I guarantee you we're a lot better shape than we were after Saturday.
That's a good point. Jake, I want to turn to you real quick. We saw the Bulldogs pick up a commitment yesterday. Big Dijon Warren, number one cornerback in the nation at JUCO. Even after that, we saw Eric Stokes was online trying to get Nyland Green to commit to Georgia. It seems that mentality, as Coach mentioned, the kind of Kirby, forever and always recruiting personality has come down through his players. His players are much more active. It seems, maybe it's always been this way, but it seems his guys are much more vocal about their recruiting. When you see a kid commit, whoever's hosted them or spoken to them before is out there retweeting that and telling them welcome to the family. The other commits are jumping in on it. So it seems to be a leadership from the top, and that we've seen that kind of enthusiasm for recruiting build amongst the players. As Coach pointed out, you and I have done a ton of interviews, you mainly, but I get a couple, where when we talk to a kid about how when he visited Athens, he's like, yeah, I spent all the time with these players, and this is what they told me. Even guys who are not starters, guys who are second, third, fourth on the depth chart, if they're from that same region or their same position, they'll go out, take a kid downtown, take them for a tour of Athens, and rave about being a part of the team, even if they're not, the projected NFL draft player. Knowing that some of those guys were in town, and I'm sure Kirby either tried to set it up, or even if he couldn't set it up, it wouldn't shock me if Corey Foreman says, hey, JT Daniels, can I talk to you? Hey, Kendall Melton, can I talk to you? California guy to California guy, and they get out and do that. Let's cut to the chase, though. Give me your opinion on where Georgia stands with those guys that were in town. They were here. It matters. So sure. What does this mean for Georgia?
I mean,
go ahead and just predict they're all going to commit, and we'll bust you up later.
Yeah. Cut that one out for old takes exposed, please. No, I don't know that it's necessarily a situation where you're going to get these guys to make any rush decisions, and that's part of the lure of bringing in these guys, these highly ranked guys, is they've got time. Georgia's willing to wait. Everybody's willing to wait for a guy like Corey Foreman. Everybody's going to wait for a guy like Mason Smith. But in order for you to start shifting the tide, you had to get him on campus. Mason was not going to come to Athens or come to Georgia. You had no chance if he had never made his way to campus. I say that. Dijon Warren has never taken a visit to Athens, so I guess it doesn't matter necessarily. But Mason's a kid, who I feel like is taking kind of a methodical approach to this. It seems like, he really wanted to see it. And I think the fact that, like I said earlier, he stuck to that plan. It was something that he's talked a lot about. I want to go to Athens. I want to go to Athens. The timing obviously keeps getting pushed back with this recruiting window being shut. But I think that the fact that he was able to follow through with that and to come with so many guys of the same caliber is huge for him. And Dayne mentioned, the atmosphere, I guess, in Athens. I will say, and I haven't been downtown, so I don't know this firsthand, but anecdotal, I hear that downtown's kind of back to what you think of when you think of Athens downtown. And so I think that that's probably advantageous for them to get in and see a much closer approximation to what Athens really is than what Brock Bowers got when he came over the summer. I mean, Dayne mentioned the word ghost town. Athens was tumbleweeds throughout the summer. There was nobody around. So I think that this was a good opportunity for them to get in, see the enthusiasm of the student body, get a feel for how it looks and what it feels like. And, obviously I'm biased because I live in Athens, but I think that Athens is one of those places that does a great job of selling itself. And certainly I think that those guys probably walked away with some of those same feelings. Now, do I think that they're going to land all those guys? Listen, I'd be lying to you to tell you I thought that they were going to get Mason Smith. Pulling a kid like that out of the state of Louisiana, it's always a great idea. It's always something that those kids seem to entertain. And it's always something that at the 12th hour, they come in and they say, well, LSU pulled it out. So I'm not all that confident, but I am more confident than I was going into this weekend. Corey Foreman, I think that's a very interesting situation because it seems like, that's been in the works for a little bit. We talked to his dad a couple weeks back and they were trying to plan a trip out to Athens. For them to kind of go ahead and fill that out and get that completed was not his first time on campus, but for him to return, I think that that's a huge indicator as well. So, I think that it's tough to say. I still feel good about Mims. Teriana Arnold's a guy that I hear a lot about behind the scenes as a guy who Georgia feels good about. It looks like they're sitting in a good position. Alabama feels really good. I know about where they stand with him as well. But this had to be an impactful visit for him. And then, if you're looking at Sorey, he's kind of been the Bigfoot of the class, tough to track down, tough to get a hold of, doesn't talk a lot. But I think that he's a kid who really, seems to be liking what Georgia has to offer. He's hearing a lot from Lavassier Carroll down there at IMG as well. And the thing about Sorey is I've said for a long time, and the feeling has sort of been that Georgia and Alabama were going to kind of split the pair of Xavier Sorey and Dallas Turner. Obviously, Alabama has Dallas Turner. I thought that really boosted their chances with Sorey. The fact that you saw him up here, huge news, great player in his own right. I encourage people to go watch the film on him. So I'm not saying it's a done deal for any of these guys, but like Coach said, you got to feel better about where you stand going into, this next week and moving forward than you did before, because some of these guys had legitimately never seen campus. Some of them, it had been months since they'd been to campus. Georgia's fresh on their mind now. And I think it's huge to have a guy like Brock who's leading the way.
And you guys have mentioned that having the California guys on the roster could help with Foreman. And I think you're right about Mason Smith, Jake, that it's tough to pull kids from Louisiana. But Kirby Smart's got a couple of years of having those tentacles down in Louisiana, pulling the Micaiah Tongues. Maybe I know that's not a Mason Smith quality talent, but the same with Cedric Van Pran last year. So you get a couple of these Louisiana guys and say, hey, go talk to Mason Smith and tell him about
Jalen Kimber from down there.
Yeah. No,
Major
Jalen
Burns?
Kimber, he's from Texas. So close enough. But no, I agree with you, Dane. I think that that's huge. And I said, if I were Kirby Smart and I were laying out the welcome committee for a guy like Corey Foreman, I'm getting Kendall Milton, I'm getting JT. That's your West Coast perspective. I'm getting Malik Herring because he's primed for a big year. And then I'm going to go over and I'm going to get Jordan Davis. And I'm going to say, hey, this is the guy who's going to be the disruptor. Maybe you get a guy like Trayvon Walker and say, hey, this is a role you can fill when you get here. A guy follow up with Trayvon. Same thing with Jordan Davis and Mason Smith. If I'm them, I say, look at what we were able to do with this guy. By all accounts, a converted offensive tackle out of high school. People wondered, would he be able to come into that defensive tackle? Obviously, he's coming into this year with huge expectations around him. I think that you got a lot to sell there on all those fronts. And, I imagine that Kirby Smart and the staff took full advantage of having those guys available.
Speaking of selling, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Athens Ford with their facilities that they've come up with to sell you a car if you need one. Of course, it's a handshake-free zone. You walk in, they'll give you gloves, masks if you need them. If you don't have them on yourself, the place is completely spotless and sanitized. But if you don't want to go into a car dealership right now, but you need a new vehicle or need a pre-owned vehicle, check out the website, athensford.com. When you go to the website, you're automatically going to get a $250 off coupon for anything that you buy, which is pretty impressive. All their cars are online, so you can shop 24/7. In your underwear, it'll be fine. No judgment here, judgment-free zone. They have a live concierge service so that you can get a real-time video walk around. They'll do FaceTime, Skype, like we were talking about earlier, Zoom. If you want to have them walk around the car, open up the glove compartment, open up the trunk, kick the tires, they'll do that for you on a live video. You can apply for financing online. You don't have to sit in the office and do that. You can complete almost all the paperwork online, knock that out. They'll give you a Kelly Blue Book value online, so you don't have to sit around wait for that either. They'll even do a test drive. You can arrange for a test drive. They'll bring the vehicle out. You try it out at the place of your choice. And then, of course, all the final paperwork and the vehicle delivery at your doorstep. So it's pretty simple. You don't even have to step foot in the place. They have ridiculous financing. They've introduced 0% APR financing for 84 months on 2019 models, and an optional 120 days deferred payment on most of their 2019 and 2020 new models. Of course, it's all for qualified buyers. So If you need a good sales experience, check our friends at Athens Ford. We had some big news yesterday. Georgia picked up Dijon Warren, as we mentioned. I thought it was quite interesting that, as Jake pointed out, never been to Athens. I've been to Scranton, but he's never been to Athens. So I would not go up there sight unseen, but apparently he wants to be part of this. I think his connection with Charles Warren, we had the great story from Jason Butts, and Jake, you've spoken to him multiple times. I want to go to Jake, then back to Coach Dunn, and if you would, both give me what you see in Dijon Warren and why this is big for UGA.
Well, I wrote it up yesterday in the What It Means piece, and I think that in this kid, you've got as close to a mirror image of another player as you're going to get, and that's Eric Stokes. I mean, you've got he's a dead ringer size-wise, 6'1", 185. That's what Georgia lists Eric Stokes as. That's what Dijon Warren lists as on his huddle. You're talking about a guy with sub 4.4 speed. It's obvious that Eric Stokes has that as well. This is a guy too that I think really brings an interesting facet into it because he's 21 years old. He just turned 21 yesterday. So he's an older guy. He's more mature. He's going to have an opportunity, I think, to get in and sort of play that leadership role early. And you got to think, like you said, if you've watched that or if you read that story with Jason Butt, the kid has come through some tough times in his life. He's really overcome some stuff. And I think that it's a situation for him where, you've got a supremely motivated player, a guy that has always kind of had some affection toward Georgia. And as you mentioned, Charlton Warren, just huge in this recruitment. So overall, I think that if you watch the film, great player, a guy who plays the ball, doesn't play his man necessarily. I really like that about him. He's a guy who high points it well, able to undercut routes for that reason. You don't see him kind of making a lot of lapses in coverage. And when he's able to create turnovers, which he does with some pretty startling frequency between fumbles and interceptions, he's able to grab that ball and flip the field. So it's impressive to watch. I think the biggest thing that people need to know about him is go watch what he does on special teams. It's insane how many kicks the kid has blocked throughout his JUCO career. It was just one after the next. And so I think that he's going to be a guy who can make an early impact for Georgia. And, after missing on Tony Grimes, who reclassified, the James Williams hit, this was all the more important. So kudos for the Georgia staff for being able to go ahead and get him to accelerate the timeline. I'm going to move out where the bird is.
Yeah, I like in this situation too, a couple years ago when we took Daniels as a corner, he was I'm following you around there, man. So, but you got to always look to the future, and realistically, as strong as our secondary is going to be this year, we could have some major situations happen. We know we're going to lose Daniels and Stokes, but we could also lose. There's people out there that are talking about Campbell being rated in the top 3 in the country as far as pro prospects, as far as corners. So, more than likely he'd be coming out too. So that's 3 holes pretty quickly, even though we got some guys coming up, Kimber and Ringo and guys like that. So, but you look at Kirby's MO looking back, you bring experience in here, you bring a more mature guy who would be ready to play. I don't know what the rules are because he's not going to be able to play this fall. They're not playing up there in Maryland. So he's got essentially 3 years eligibility. I don't know if that will count now. I don't know how the NCAA is going to do that, but he might just have 2 if they count this year as playing. So who knows, but he'll be able to come in here and be ready for spring practice. And again, looking at our depth, he would add critical depth right off the bat. And the one thing that we do with all our DBs, all our secondary guys, and our wide receivers and running backs is that they're the real pinpoint of all our special teams. So he'll be right in there with that too. So it was a good lick for us, and came out of the blue. I mean, everybody's talking about when's he going to even visit, and then all of a sudden he commits. So, but that's one good thing about I'll add this about having your secondary coach as the lead recruiter on a guy. A guy can be recruiting him, but There's nothing like having a guy that's actually your coach being the guy that's recruiting you. I think that's pretty well documented over the past. But and we have certainly specific guys recruit, go after receivers and all that. But Charlton's done a good job going after this guy, and it's obvious in the statements that he has a good rapport with him.
Dane, you have any thoughts about Dijon Warren? Get a chance to check out his film or anything?
I just think that what Coach was saying about the roster management and how far ahead you have to kind of look as a coach. I mean, this is, he may be a massive contributor and maybe even, first or second corner on the team next year. It's tough to tell for me a lot of times when you look at JUCO tape, how that's going to transfer to SEC play. I thought DJ Daniels made that transition about as well as any player could. And I was looking at tape of Arkansas this morning and seeing Rakeem Boyd. He made that same transition of going from JUCO to now SEC running back. But it doesn't happen that smoothly for all players. Sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes it takes longer than that. Jermaine Johnson did fine, but I wouldn't say that he has broken out to the extent that maybe a lot of fans thought he would. All that to say is Georgia's going to need bodies in that secondary, and Georgia's going to need bodies that have played some college football, because you don't want to wake up into the first game of 2021 and you have to rely on Kimber and Ringo straight up. Now, maybe they can handle it. That's fine, but you don't want to put them in a position where they have to. And I think that's the roster management that, a full, 18 months out, Kirby Smart's been working to make sure that once this group of Stokes and Campbell are gone, that there's something behind them.
I think the roster management is going to be fascinating when the news came out, I guess last week, that, hey, no matter how much football you play this fall, it will not count against your eligibility. So I'm waiting for the NCAA to come out and say, oh, and by the way, we're going to increase your scholarship count from 85 to 110, 105, something like that. Coach, how are the teams going to handle this when basically everybody can play this year and it not count towards their eligibility?
Yeah, for some schools, it's going to be dollars and cents. I mean, we saw the same thing happen this spring when COVID took over, and NCAA ruled that the spring athletes could come back and play again this next spring. And, schools like Georgia welcomed them back and said, hey, we'll be glad to have you. Whereas other ones said, look, we're not going to be able to provide you your scholarship again. So I think for sure we'll be able to do that at Georgia for football, but whether they'll say, the numbers, if they give a hard and fast number like 110, then all of a sudden there's going to be some guys be put on scholarship that aren't coming back, that you could go ahead and put them on to help them. But I think it's going to be, if you want to come back, it won't hurt your 85, but I don't think they'll give a hard and fast number how many you can have on the team, because too many guys would find ways to get new players and work around it some way. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But and for a guy, let's just say a guy had an injury his junior year and missed his whole junior year. Now he's playing his senior year and might not be able to play as much. But to have a chance to come back and relive that junior year again and play, the year that he missed, I think that'll be helpful to those guys. And let's say a senior that was a backup this year and got to play some and really came on strong and said, look, it's all worth it. I'd like to try one more year. Maybe I can improve enough to get a tryout with the pros or just be part of the team again. I know how much everybody misses being on a team and being around it, even though it's rough and work hard and all, but to have a chance to play for a championship and be involved with all these guys, I think it'll be great for a lot of these in between guys that aren't the stars to have that extra year.
Well, and I think it's exciting too to have the prospect of, even if those guys maybe aren't, like you said, guaranteed locks for the league, they can probably still help your team in a number of ways. And so the opportunity to bring back that depth, have those guys working on special teams, leading meetings. I mean, they're going to know the ins and outs of this coaching staff and how to run that stuff. I think it sets them up well in that regard. But I agree with you too, Coach, that I think it comes down to money. And, if you're looking at a program like Iowa or even Ohio State. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to invest what they need to in football to win. I think they certainly will. But you're talking about them projecting budget shortfalls of $80 to $100 million this year. it's tough to make the numbers work out, I think, for everybody, and to keep other sports alive at the same time, and do that. And I think that that's really where a program like Georgia has been smart and really, laid back a lot of money. They've got that war chest of cash that people seem to give them a hard time for over the years. It's looking like that will be extra beneficial. If you got to pay for some extra guys to come back, pay to keep some guys around, and I'm sure that the added depth will be there. But it's going to be very interesting to see nationwide how that affects things and how it affects recruiting. Because if I'm a kid, looking at coming into a program, and all of a sudden I've got 3 seniors returning at my position, maybe there's an easier path to playing time for me somewhere else. And I think that that's going to really open some things up, especially once these visits resume, once coaches kind of get the ins and outs of this down. I don't think that it's something that they'll hesitate to use as a recruiting strategy down the line.
Well, here's one thing about what you just said, though. If I'm a coach, though, and a senior wants to come back, I would say, hey, we want you to come back, but I don't want you to really say anything about it right now because it might hurt our recruiting a little bit. But we can see that happening. But the other thing is, let's just go into what happened when Sony and Nick and Roquan and those guys decided to come back after the tough year that Kirby had the first year. The symbolism to the rest of the team was enormous, that they believed in the program and they wanted to come back and help put Georgia on the map. And that leadership and that direction was invaluable. The same thing would be true of a guy that's not quite as good, but is a team guy. And Kirby would point out, look, this guy is what Georgia's all about. It takes stars and it takes good players. This guy wants to be part of it. He came back. He's sacrificing to come back. You need to work hard and go by the example these guys are showing. So I'm not getting hokey pokey here. I'm just saying realistically, it's a good move by the NCAA to let these guys have another shot at their senior year. I guarantee you, if I didn't have my senior year in college, I don't know where I would be right now with my life, because I had a lot of success early in my career, but my senior year was the best year I ever had in my whole life as far as athletics. We almost won the national championship. We didn't get to play for it. We lost to Penn State, but those kids that played on our team, lifelong friends, and have meant so much to me. And people talk about, why you're playing football. And I know the money's out there, but I guarantee you, team sport wise, you show me something that's better than college football, and you really have to show me something, because I wouldn't believe you.
That year of eligibility, that would count for graduate transfers too, right? Like they would have the option for another year if they wanted.
I would have to assume so.
Right. So I think of a guy like Lawrence Cager, who anytime I see him tweet, it's always something about the best decision you can make, kid, is to go to Athens, who just fell in love with the place and had his season shortened. I bet that's an NFL guy who would have had to consider really hard, would he return for this season in that scenario? And then you start projecting, what does that look like? Well, Jamie Newman's in that spot this year. Maybe he doesn't want to get behind Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields if he doesn't have a season that gets him in the first or second round. I'm just saying it opens up a wealth of possibilities.
And I agree. I think just from a greedy standpoint, I would like to see these guys play college football. We follow college football. We report about it. It's our livelihood. Another year of some of these guys is great. But I just think about what we've asked these players to do. They get sent home in March. Hey, good luck working out. Hope you had some weights at home. If not, you're picking up milk jugs, filled with water, or, you're doing a ton of push-ups. Say they do figure out some way to work out. They work out for months on their own. They miss spring practice. Okay, then they finally in July get to come to camp. Get to come to campus and use the facilities. Of course, no coaches there, but they can at least get a place to work out. Then they have that phase 2, which is, kind of keeping them in a bubble, but the coaches can have some walkthroughs with them and such like that. Then now the season's pushed back. Phase 2 is taken away. Then they finally get to phase 3. They're actually practicing. We might see a situation, the first time I think we see any school come up with 600 cases on campus. Classes will go online. Maybe they stay in a bubble, maybe they don't. But the point being, if you're the third string walk-on long snapper, part of your college experience is being in that locker room with these guys, and then being on campus, being able to enjoy the college experience. This is going to be a crap year for a lot of these people. These guys are fighting just to play the game, but their college experience is whacked out. It's completely different. No parties, no fun, none of that stuff. If we can say, look, we're going to let you play because you're fighting and doing all the dedication and all the sacrifices to make the season happen so that we at home, we in the media, can enjoy the season. We know the sacrifices you're making, but you're not going to be punished for it. You can come back next year. A lot of these guys, if you follow remember they go to classes in the summer, a lot of them graduate, about 3.5 years into their collegiate career. They start taking some graduate classes. They get an additional year on their scholarship. A lot of these guys could really advance towards a master's degree. So I just think that it's the fairest thing to do. It's good for the fans. It's good for the players. It's crazy for roster management. But if you're a Georgia fan, you got to be excited because, as we pointed out, Kirby is always thinking about roster management. So I think it's a great thing. This is finally something the NCAA has done that I really agree with. And I know a lot of people are like, well, this causes a lot of issues. What about the freshmen coming up? Hey, there's a lot of these kids' high school seniors have been canceled already, So I'm very excited that this is on the table. We don't know the ins and outs of it, but I think it's a good idea. If you're watching us, then you're probably, if you're not on Twitter right now, you don't realize that Todd Monken, the Georgia offensive coordinator, is speaking with the Georgia beat writers. We will have a ton of stories at UGAsports.com about what he had to say. Be sure to follow UGAsports.com for that. Coach, have you heard anything about the install over at UGA? What's going on with the offense over there? I mean, Todd Monken's got a offensive line to rebuild. He's got a tight end to find. He's got a stable of backs, stable of quarterbacks, a lot of wide receivers. But we're only seeing 55, 60-second clips coming out of UGA to really kind of get an idea of what's going on. Have you heard anything or any thoughts on Todd Monken and what he's doing at UGA right now?
I just know what Todd's all about. Very disciplined coach, and you can read what you want to, but people are saying and everything. But if you just realistically, we do have a lot of unknowns about as far as people that have played significant roles. The only thing that I've heard in the offensive line is Owen Condon has made a real move there at right tackle. And we knew that he had the ability, but he had a hurt shoulder in the spring, and he's rehabbed it. And he's taking advantage of the situation that he has a year on McClendon and Truss, and the fact that the other two young guys, Tate Radledge and Broderick Jones, are young guys. So from what I understand, that he's really taking advantage of his experience and work habits, and is very competitive there at that position. There's no first team, second team at this point, but I do know that from people that have talked to me that have been around there, that I'm really happy for Owen. His mother went to Georgia and he came here out of Oklahoma, and hopefully he'll get a good shot at that role. But quarterback wise, there's going to be some up in the air stuff there about all those guys. But I do know that Dwan Mathis continues to get out there and do a lot of good things. And you got to look at the fact that he has a similar skill set to Jamie Newman. So if Jamie would be the starter, you got to look at that would be good for Dwan.
For sure. Well, and I encourage people to get over to UGAsports.com. We've got a series coming out. We've had the first edition of it yesterday, where we're examining the quarterbacks. And what I did was speak to the guys that they trained with. So we've got upcoming on Dwan, we've got upcoming on Jamie, Brock even as well. Still working on JT and Stetson, but we talked about Carson Beck yesterday, and you mentioned that depth chart back there, Coach. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. I still think Newman, presumably the starter, but I've heard some of those same things about Dwan, that he's pressing for playing time, and could possibly, I think everybody wants to go ahead and give that second spot to JT Daniel. I don't think Dwan Mathis is going to give it up all that easy.
I'll tell you, Jake, the thing in that story that you had about Carson Beck, his prior relationship with Todd Monken, I had no idea. That was a nice nugget.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, I think people forget that Todd was down in Jacksonville and worked in that area, and his kids played ball with Carson, and so there's a lot of familiarity here between the two of them, and so they've kind of got a history in there. Denny Thompson did not hold back. He said, I think it's not only possible. He said, I think he will win this job at some point. He said, I think that he's going to be the future at Georgia's quarterback there, and I think that it was exciting to hear him say that, and it's going to be very, I think, interesting to see how the rest of these play out. I think people will really want to stay tuned into that series because I had a lot of fun talking to these guys and hearing what they had to say about each of their guys.
I would say this isn't Little League baseball here. Nothing against Carson, but he's got a long road to hoe to overtake these guys this year. I think he certainly got the ability to do it, but for Kirby to make this move with his offense and make this kind of transition, this young man would have to make a tremendous move here to be a starting quarterback as a freshman. But stranger things have happened. But I just think invested a lot here bringing in 2 transfers. So, anybody's guru or helper is going to be on the side of a guy, and he knows a lot about what he can do and everything like that. And I wasn't trying to be smart saying this in Little League baseball. I guess I was, but this is a very serious situation here because he just making a change on a team that went 11-2 last year and ran roughshod through the East. So it's going to be a big, important decision who the starting quarterback is going to be. That's for sure.
I want to touch on Dwan Mathis. I remember when the news broke of Jamie Newman coming in, a lot of people said, okay, well, that's big. That kind of answers that question as to who will be the guy. Everyone knew how good he was at Wake Forest. Everybody knew how much he was wanted by programs all across the nation. And when Jake broke the news about JT Daniels, I saw a lot of people go, well, there goes Dwan Mathis. He's going to transfer, or there goes Carson Beck. He's not coming, just a lot of that. And we reached out to some people around Dwan Mathis and, said, hey, what's his take on this? And it wasn't frustration. It wasn't anger. It was almost like, I think back to that clip of Carolina Panthers quarterback. What can I think of him?
Cam Newton?
Yeah, Cam Newton, when he shakes his head. You always see that little video clip like, okay, this is where it's going to be. It's kind of what I thought Dwan Mathis. Dwan's like, let's go, and he knows Dwan's like, look, if I'm going to make it in the NFL, there's 32 starting jobs there. If I want to be able to win one of those, I got to at least be able to win the one in college. So I think it's definitely a situation where Dwan's like, look, I'm healthy finally. I'm cleared to go. I've been here, yeah, it's a new offensive coordinator, but I know I got the timing down with these wide receivers, and I've got something to prove. So I think the people who want to anoint, Newman 1, Daniels 2, and put Dwan Mathis out there at 3, I think they're being a little unfair just because of maybe they're working a little bit too much on rankings and not enough on potential, So.
Well, I think as well, Radi, you mentioned that familiarity, and I think that that's a big thing. Dwan Mathis has it seems to have a lot of support from this Georgia team. We've seen guys get on Twitter and say, hey, this guy, people are overlooking his ability. And I think that, having that clubhouse support is also important. I'm not saying that that's what's going to give a guy a job or not, but I do think that it's important to have a guy who can inspire that kind of confidence and bring that kind of leadership around him.
Most of the guys that get to this level of college football have some uncommon level of confidence because they were the big man on their own campus wherever they played high school. I mean, Coach Donnan told me a story when we were doing the Donnan and Dayne podcast over the summer where one of his former players, a family member, came up to Coach after and said, hey, we just give him a shot at quarterback. And the guy was not even a quarterback. He just felt good about what he could do in that position. And so if that happens with non-quarterbacks, think about guys that were star quarterbacks in high school. I mean, all of these guys think that they're good enough to win this job, and they should think that because otherwise they're not going to win the job.
Yeah, and a lot of our state champions, so it's they've won at the highest level at which they've played so far. So I get it. Jake, I want you to start getting ready for questions, but before we hit on those, I want to touch on our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors. from that idea of, that confidence that I'm going to beat everybody in the business, everybody who competes in the same field as I do. You get that with Ryan Lucia and the folks at Aaron Overhead Doors. 5-star rankings out of 705 first party reviews, they have 5 out of 5 stars. So when it comes to winning, our guys at Aaron Overhead Doors do that. They win customer service. They were founded on the idea of being a wow customer service style company. Again, they could have been building widgets. They could have been doing car repair. They could have been digging ditches, mopping floors. Whatever they did, it was going to be a wow customer service philosophy. They just happened to build and service overhead doors. They do residential, they do commercial, they do custom work. So if you get an idea that you're thinking, hey, this would be neat if we had a door that we can bring up and down, or some sort of entryway, or hey, we've got a back deck where we receive stuff, commercially. The stuff that I've seen before doesn't quite work. Talk to the folks at Aaron Overhead Doors. They will come to you. They'll converse with you and give you a meeting for free. You don't have to pay them just to come out. You can set up the time and place. So it's really easy. You can actually click on their scheduling app and their scheduling window and set up a schedule. So again, it's just ridiculous customer service that just happens to be in the overhead door field. So shout out to Ryan Lucia and our friends at Aaron Overhead Doors. I also want to mention some great customer service. A friend of mine who stole some sausage earlier had to re-download his app, and he was downloading the YourPie app. When he went to that YourPie app, it's asked you, have you been referred by anybody? I sent him the little referral code in the YourPie app, and now I'm getting free breadsticks. So if you have the YourPie app, go ahead and send up. If you click on referrals, there's a little code in there. You can send that to your friends. When they download the app and put your referral in there, you get all sorts of free points and free breadsticks. So great customer service with the folks over at YourPie. Again, Natalie and Drew French, some of my favorite people, great UGA graduates. They believe in customer service. That was the whole point of creating the YourPie thing. It was like, look, let's get this customized. Let's get a pizza the way you want it. How do you want your dough? How do you want your sauce? How do you want your cheese? How do you want all the toppings? They have those drink machines that give you like 350 different drink combinations. So just fantastic service from the folks at YourPie. And again, more UGA fans. So shout out to our friends at YourPie.
And they still have that chicken al pastor craft pizza that they're doing. And I just learned they have fresh Mex cheese sticks. So it's like a cheese stick with a Tex-Mex flair to it. So that's something I need to be all about.
If you don't have a friend to send you a referral code, I'm sure Radi will take your free breadsticks as well.
Be happy to. What's on the wall behind you, Jake?
That is a gator skin. I actually I killed that gator 10 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many Georgia-related puns that people can throw this.
Yeah, no, I'm down here in Gulf Shores, and we went out gator hunting about 10 years ago, and pulled that guy in from the bayou. So that was a fun time.
Most people have like a bear skin.
Yeah, yeah, these damn swamp people down here. All right, let's talk. Let's do some questions. Kay Leland here with a good one. Interested in Georgia's recruiting strategy. This one for Coach. He says, is it a little bit more difficult to manage the national recruiting strategy and be pursuing these guys all over the country? Or does that not really matter? And recruiting is just recruiting no matter where a player lives.
Good question.
Yeah, I just think the advent of the internet starting back in the late 90s there, just put you in such a better position to evaluate players with the way they were able to take these tapes and put them on, and put them all together where you saw all the running backs at once, and which is normal now, but back then it was golden. So I think that, but now, because everybody's just got the same kind of handicap, because you can't go out on the road, you can't do anything. So some of maybe the lesser schools are maybe picking up a little bit because they're doing Zoom meetings just like the better schools are. And there's not that much difference between a guy talking to them and except if they have an existing relationship or somebody just wearing them out. So there's no question that the one thing that's helped our recruiting this year was a quick start we had in state as far as getting the numbers up with those 7 early commitments. But Kirby's proven with the guys he's been able to get out of state and around the country that they go for the best guy in that position, regardless of where he is. And we've been right in on a lot of them. We've lost some too, but you're not going to get the best guy in the country at every position every year. So that's kind of a stupid answer there from that point. But, when I was back in the old days, we used to have our own area, and then we would have where we would look at position guys, and pick out a couple and find out if they had any background. I know when I was in North Carolina, we recruited Chris Kupek and Matt Kupek from Sauset, New York. First time I ever went to New York City. Man, I was a fish out of water. But I never will forget when I was watching Matt on tape that morning, or his film at the school. He was a left-handed passer. And so I went to the basketball game, and I hadn't met him yet because I couldn't talk to him on the day of the competition. So I was sitting up in the stands. I get the opening tip. He was a right-handed passer. You get the opening tip. He runs down and shoots a left-handed jump shot from right at the top of the key. And I'm saying to myself, I thought this guy was right-handed. So I went over and asked his brother. He said, "Hey, coach, he's ambidextrous." I said, "Hey, we need to sign him." And right off the bat, this kid was. But the point is, for the question, the national recruiting has enhanced ours. Unbelievable who all we've enhanced our team with, these national guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I think that Kirby Smart and those guys look at it as the same. They're going to recruit a guy in California the same way they're going to recruit a guy in their backyard. And I think that you've seen that with the way that they've approached this, Corey Foreman, Mason Smith. They're on those guys just as hard as they were on Brock Vandegrift. And, again, kudos to Brock Vandegrift. I think that his service has been invaluable to Georgia this year. Having that available, like I said, the Sooners did a thing this weekend. They had Caleb Williams out there, but he had to fly in from DC. It's not the situation like that with Vandegrift. He's able to pop in. He's able to host guys at his house. Guys are going over there for dinner. I just think that's been such a huge advantage for them this year, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit for it.
Don't discount it's not recruiting, but I guess the selling and the national footprint that Kirby and company are doing with alumni as well. I mean, we've seen 2 massive donations from Matthew Stafford and his family to UGA in recent weeks. One was a pair donation from him, and then also the Kirby Smart Foundation. That's big time stuff to get a guy that was from Texas, that still loves Athens, that's still an NFL quarterback. That doesn't just happen because the guy had money to give away. There's relationships that get built through that. And Kirby is maximizing on some stuff that happened long before he was in Athens as the head coach.
It's a great point. I like the fact that
Absolutely,
to answer the question, when you're trying to do that, you can use that appeal of state pride for the guys in state. Hey, put on for your city, as they say. Peach State football, let's prove that it's number one. If we have the best players in the state of Georgia, we can win a national title. That works. At the same time, if we're going for those national guys, you say, look, when we think we're going to be a national champion, we're grabbing the best players from the nation. I also like that sales pitch. So I'm not saying that you do have to customize your sales pitch when you're talking to these different guys. So in answer to the question, which is harder, I don't know that either one is harder. I think you just sell it a different way to each one of them, So that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree. Keith UGA 1 on the board with an interesting comparison here and question about it. He says, do you see Dijon Warren as more raw than DJ Daniel coming in from JUCO? I'm curious as to how they compare. Warren's story is something, true grit to keep moving forward through all the setbacks he had. Really impressive. So, Coach, any feelings on how those 2 guys compare, kind of coming out of the same ranks, the JUCO ranks?
Just watching the tapes, and my memory's not like it used to be, but I think maybe a little better competition down here, at Georgia Military, what they were facing, and maybe at Lackawanna up there. But nothing against, it's not the kids' fault there, but I think certainly Warren could play in any place in the country, JUCO wise. But the one thing that really impressed me about Daniel early was Mel Tucker was just, even after the kid committed to South Carolina, he just said, Coach, we're going to get this guy. He's my guy. He's coming here. And, he had a little bit of shaky situation there committing to South Carolina, but he came, and I know that he was the guy Tucker wanted, and then Kirby obviously did too. So I haven't had the conversation with Warren that much about Coach Warren about this kid, because I haven't had a chance to go over there, since March. So I really don't know enough about the kid's background, but certainly for us to take a junior college cornerback, the guy's got to be able to be really special, because the man, the Kang, or whatever they call Kirby, doesn't make a mistake on guys like that. So I'm happy about it.
I think that there's definitely probably some more rawness from Warren than there was Daniel. And I think that's primarily because of the layoff in football that Dijon Warren had coming out of high school. I mean, he didn't play his senior year of high school. He was kind of out of the game for a few years. He's really only got that 1 year of JUCO under his belt. And it was very impressive. I mean, the film's great. Don't get me wrong about that. But DJ was a guy who went straight out of high school, straight into JUCO, and then straight into the SEC. I think that that kind of transition probably makes it a little easier for him to, make an impact early on. But I'm definitely not riding off Dijon Warren. Like I said, if you've read the kid's story, it would be hard for anybody to write him off, I think.
Yeah, great story. I thought Jason Butt did a good one. And remember, folks, Dave McMahon did a great story today. It's fresh up at UGAsports.com about defensive backs Georgia's taken, from the JUCO route going back to 1981. So a list of how well they have fared. Some have been great, some have not. And if you want to run down to those, check out what Dave McMahon did. And of course, I thought we have a lot of new long form stories from Jason Butt. He's been covering the Georgia beat forever. He also covers the Falcons beat, but he was working with the Athletic for a while there. Now he's working with us. So every Saturday and Monday, there is a long form story. Really good in-depth work from Jason Butt. And I'll point that out to you. And remember, we do have a promotion going on right now for any frontline workers or first responders to get 75% off of the subscription. Just our way of trying to say thanks. You just need to email me to get the code. We don't put that code out for the public because it's only for frontline workers and first responders. So just email me, Radi at UGAsports.com, and I will get you that code.
Hey, I remember, Roddy, when we had the Brown kid from over at Carrollton, the wide receiver, and he said, I got a cousin playing JUCO. His name is Jamie Henderson. And we found out about him through that. And good gracious, what an unbelievable player Jamie was. Played pro ball, had a little bit of accident there on a motorcycle, but what a tremendous player he was for us. You got to, the one thing everybody that listens to this show or watches UGA, reads your stuff, when you bring in a transfer or a JUCO, you better make sure that guy's got about a 90% chance of playing, because you're going to be stepping on some toes bringing him in the first place. But you bring him in and he's not playing, then you got a real situation for yourself that you don't want to have.
Well, the only place I know that you can never screw up is if you swing out and check out our friends at Academia Brewing Company. Fantastic beers, and the beer's so good. We saw someone actually sneak some beer into the NBA bubble. So we've seen pictures floating around of the good Academia beer inside the NCAA bubble. I mean, it's going to be inside the NBA bubble. And that just shows you that's the only reason the bubble's working is because they have good beer in there, and those guys don't have to leave the facility to get some good stuff. So shout out to our friends at Academia Brewing Company who support our show, support our website, and they take good care of us when we are out there. Fantastic food, fantastic place to watch a game. We got college football on this Saturday, apparently. Dave tells me that Austin Peay is playing football. So football season is going to be here, it seems, and the NFL is starting up. Of course, all the NHL, all the Major League Baseball, all the NBA playoff games are being shown out at Academia Brewing Company. They have the giant screens out there.
What's the betting line on that Austin Peay game? Just asking.
I don't know, but I'm willing to put some money on it just to watch.
You need to go to therapy if you're betting on the Austin Peay game, buddy.
Shut up.
Did some research on that game because last year, Roddy, you remember you and I went down to Montgomery to do that little speech before the game when they played. Sanford played against Youngstown State, and this year Johnny Williams, who used to be the defensive coordinator at Troy and assistant athletic director at Alabama, is a bowl director for them at that game, and they're really putting it out. But a real little nugget here, Doug Bell, who I used to do games with on Conference USA, his son's a starting right tackle for Austin Peay, Garrett Bell. So let's watch him at right tackle for the Austin Peay Governors against Central Arkansas on Saturday night.
That's all I'm saying. There's football coming. So check out our friends, Academy Brewing Company. They will have the games for you to watch them out there. So big shout out to them. All right, let's hit up a couple other questions, Jake, before we get both out of here.
Yeah, this was an interesting one, I thought, from ZXBY140 over on the board for Coach. He says, regarding the offense, would you expect to see more of what we saw from Monken at Oklahoma State and Southern Miss in terms of his offensive sets with two backs, diamond formations, or you think you'll see something a bit more similar to what he was doing in the NFL?
I think it's going to be a combo just because he's got that in his repertoire. He can do all of that. He's got those formation, his packages. A lot of it has to do with who your players are. If you got better tight ends than you do wide receivers, you might run more one back, two tight ends, or maybe two backs, two tight ends, and one receiver. But it just personnel groupings have a lot to say with it. But he's got all that in his repertoire, that's for sure. And it was pretty versatile there at both those places. He had great quarterbacks. Brandon Whedon ended up a baseball player that came back to Oklahoma State. He's like 26 when he's playing quarterback at Oklahoma and had a big year at Oklahoma State, And then this kid that's playing backup quarterback for San Francisco now was his quarterback at Southern Miss, and he did a good job for him too. I think it'll be a little bit of everything. And the best thing about it, we still got a month before we got our first game. So there's plenty of practice time to figure out who the best players are and the best personnel groupings are.
Hey, Jake, before you get to another question, I'll give you some insights from Todd Monken meeting with the Beat media. He told them, just some quick thoughts from Coach Monken. He said that he has as good a looking group of players as he's had anywhere in college football. So I think that's appropriate when you've won the recruiting title back to back to back. Georgia's roster management, as we mentioned earlier, is pretty good. So you got to think Todd Monken's kind of licking his chops, looking at that offensive line and all the depth he has at quarterback and running back and wide receiver. He said that Jamie Newman, the quarterback, is a better thrower than many people think, and that JT Daniels is a better athlete than he thought. So not giving away anything there, but saying, look, for people who may want to pigeonhole Jamie Newman into just kind of a dual threat guy, he said, look, he can throw the ball, and JT Daniels is not just going to stand back there like a statue. Speaking of, he says it's very hard to be a statue at quarterback and be expected to hit explosive plays. So maybe that gives us a little insight into the type of play calling that Todd Monken wants to get into. And he also said that he commended Zamir White and James Cook for having outstanding offseason and said he's very excited about the entire running back room. And you look at Kendall Milton and the number of 5 stars you have in that room, it's pretty impressive running back room that Coach Monken has inherited there. Any other questions you want to get into?
Yeah, one last one here. This one kind of came in just a couple minutes ago, but I thought it was a really cool question from Joja Dog over on the board. He wants to know who are some potential candidates on the team that could benefit from that extra year of eligibility passed by the NCAA. One guy who jumped out to me straight away, I thought Monty Rice. I think Monty is a guy who, unless he just comes out and has a Roquan Smith-esque season this year, I think that you could see him maybe potentially coming back for another year and just continuing to show how solid he is at that inside linebacker spot. I think that he would be a good person probably to look at early on. At least he was first came to my mind.
Yeah, I think that's going to be hard to project and be, but I would say this about Todd Monken that that's some good statements. One statement always hits my mind when somebody says this is the best athletes he's been around is Howard Schnellenberger got the Oklahoma job after being at Louisville and being at Miami and everything. And he made that statement, and Switzer went up to him and said, hey, I just want to remind you, Colorado and Texas have pretty good players, and there's a team up north called the Big Red that's got the better players than we do. So, Todd's been in some good programs, but I guarantee you, it's just like when I was able to go to Oklahoma after being in some of these places. It's just unbelievable the difference between the athletes at Oklahoma and Georgia and then say Southern Miss and Oklahoma State.
Very true. See, I would go a different way than you're taking that question, Jake. Is, I guess if you're thinking about maybe an upperclassman who could take advantage of that extra year, Monty Rice, perfect call. I agree with you 100%. I think about some guys who maybe have just been beat up, who've had some bad luck, like a Justin Schaefer who had the neck injury, he can get – I think he could come out this year and show that he's ready for the NFL, but he could come out this year and do well and then come back a second year and do, have a bigger extra senior year. I don't know how you put it, but I just think he could show the NFL, look, it wasn't a one-year fluke. I did this 2 years in a row. I kicked people's butts, in the trenches. I'm ready for the NFL. I think that the Chad Lindbergh, a guy who's just been snake bit, when it comes to injuries. If all of a sudden he gets out there and says, look, I can have the full collegiate career, this year, as, coach is talking about, he comes in and really shows some stuff, this year wins a job and then, but it doesn't cost him anything. In other words, a lot of guys who had setbacks, Rion Davis, Don Blaylock, guys like that, who may not, they don't have to force themselves to come back so quickly off of an ACL or something like that, or a shoulder injury. Keely Ringo with the shoulder injury, guys that say, look, it's okay. This year doesn't count. You still got your years ahead of you to make your case for the NFL. Plus, there's a lot of guys who can get that degree too. And I know we think about it as how it can help them in their NFL careers, but I think a lot of guys being able to squeeze in another year. I had a friend that stuck around in the Redcoat band for 7 years because he enjoyed college so much. When got some extra degrees and such. Took a lot of classes, just loved it.
You can just say it was you. You don't have to be embarrassed.
I have zero music ability.
I know. I know it didn't. You didn't get any extra degrees.
Hey, I didn't cry after having to take a fifth year to get out of college. It didn't bother me. But
I'll tell you that if Ben Cleveland gets another year, man, that's going to feel like 8 years of him just being on campus.
Who's that?
Question.
If Ben Cleveland gets another year,
I figured this was Justin Young's year to come back again. Somebody called it, and Hunter Renfro. I think it should be called a Hunter Renfro rule. I said it when it first came out, but I think some of those guys who've had some unfortunate injuries, this could be a great comeback. Well, like we saw with Nick Chubb the year he came back last year with Zamir White. If those kind of recovery years didn't count towards their eligibility, how great would that have been? So, just my thoughts. Maybe it's not the way the question was asked, just the way I took it.
We do have one question in the YouTube chat, and it's about freshman wide receivers and what we've heard about them in practice so far.
Yeah, I think the one guy that everybody's talking about is Jermaine Burton, just really explosive guy that has, a lot of experience playing at a high level there in California and being trained over there by Terrence Edwards. Really is ready to go. Certainly, Rosemead has got it. Arian Smith hadn't been out there. One thing that I feel like I forgot to say that Matt Luke is doing with Warren Erickson is kind of cross-training him because of his ability to know every position in the line. He is working some at center now, which we hadn't heard about. Maybe y'all had that on your website or something, I don't know, but having him have that kind of ability, again, here's a guy that's maybe the sixth offensive lineman, and now he could be a guy that could come in and guard our center.
Like Georgia's interior with like Cedric Van Pran, Clay Webb, Warren Erickson, Ben Cleveland. I know we talk a lot about the offensive tackles because those are the big money positions, but the center of that offensive line should be pretty impressive. Speaking of, we hopefully next week we'll know even more about him. We're going to keep pumping our sources and hopefully get some more insight. Like I said, Coach mentioned Jermaine Burton was making an impression early on in the camp. So, even during the walkthroughs and workouts, his name popped up, and now we're hearing more about it now that they got pads on. Hopefully next week, next Tuesday at noon, we will have more insights for you, and be sure to tune in then. For Dayne, Jake, Coach Donnan, and myself, we hope to see you next week. Everybody take care and stay safe.